Ethan Cole worked with machines more than with people. He was 29, tall and lean, with oil stains that never washed off his fingers no matter how hard he tried. He liked quiet places where a man could hear the hum of a power line or the whistle of a vent. The spaceports were never quiet, but inside his small workshop on the lower ring of the trade station, it almost felt peaceful. He fixed engines for cargo pilots and installed navigation chips for traders who flew between the moons. He never dreamed big. He told people he was happy just keeping ships working. If he had a philosophy, it was simple. Engines talk plain, he liked to say. People don't. Machines made sense. They broke when something was wrong, and they got better when you fixed the fault. There was a kind of honesty in that. The trade station hung between worlds like a silver wheel turning in darkness. Ethan had lived there long enough that he could walk its corridors half asleep. He knew which vending machines actually gave hot coffee and which ones spat out brown water that tasted like battery acid. He knew which guards liked to chat and which ones looked the other way if you carried a wrench instead of a badge. That quiet, predictable life changed one morning when the repair log flashed a request he had never seen before. It bore the royal symbol of the Dominion of Human Worlds. At first, he thought it was an error. He even laughed and asked his apprentice, "Did someone try to prank me with a fake royal contract?" It was not a prank. The order required him to report to Dock 12 to repair a royal transport ship. The instructions were formal, full of capital letters and seals. The payment was big, too big for one man with a wrench. He stared at it for a full minute, scratched his head and said, "Guess I'll bring the good toolkit." Dock 12 was unlike any part of the station he had seen. Guards lined the walkway. Polished silver walls reflected the lights in perfect stillness.
Ethan
had worked near ships that carried goods, workers, or explorers. This one looked like it carried history itself. The hull gleamed like glass and steel blended together. The emblem of the Dominion stretched along its side like a golden sunburst. A small group of people waited near the ramp. One man in uniform approached Ethan. "Mechanic Cole?" the man asked. Ethan nodded. "Follow me." The transport suffered a power failure on its jump engines. Ethan's mind went into work mode. "Any sign of overload?" he asked. "The readings are confidential, but you will see for yourself," the man replied without emotion. They walked into the heart of the ship, where rows of polished metal reflected clean light. It smelled faintly of ozone and new circuits. Ethan set down his kit and opened the lower panel of the main coil. The readings flashed red and orange, an ugly cocktail of burned-out relays and tired wires. As he worked, he noticed a young woman standing near the corner, watching quietly. Her clothes were simple, dark brown pants, light jacket, hair tied loosely behind her head, but something about her presence drew attention. She did not have the sharp look of an officer or the stiff stance of a guard. Instead, she seemed curious, almost amused. Ethan nodded politely. "Careful. This thing can spark if you step too close." "I am not afraid of a little spark," she said, stepping closer to watch his hands. Her voice was clear and calm. "Good," he said, turning a wrench. "I could use someone who isn't afraid. Hold this light for me." She did so, steady hands keeping the beam focused. Her eyes followed every move he made. "You fix ships like you know them personally," she said softly. "I've spent more time with engines than with my own family," Ethan replied with a grin. Engines complain less. That made her laugh, a bright, genuine sound that startled the quiet space. "You talk freely," she said. "I talk like a man trying to stop a short circuit," he answered. "Conversation keeps me calm." They worked together for almost an hour. She handed him tools without being asked, each time faster, as if she already knew what he needed next. When the damaged coil finally came back online, lights across the cabin flickered to life, smooth and steady. Ethan wiped sweat from his forehead and looked pleased with his work. "There it goes," he said happily. One more stubborn engine back from the dead. Without thinking, he raised his hand, grinning. The young woman hesitated just a second, then smiled and met his raised palm with hers in a sharp high five. The sound echoed in the empty bay. Ethan laughed. Perfect fix. Around them, the guards and attendants froze. The uniformed man from earlier looked like he had forgotten how to breathe. Ethan noticed their expressions, confused. "What's wrong?" he asked, lowering his hand. The young woman only smiled again, though her eyes seemed brighter now, almost shining. "Nothing at all," she said. "Thank you for the help." Ethan shrugged, thinking maybe royal guards were just weird about cleanliness. He packed up his tools. "Any time," he said. "Engines don't fix themselves, after all." As he left the dock, he looked back once. She was still standing there near the humming machine, watching him go. What he did not know, what almost no one on the station knew, was that the young woman he had just met was not merely a passenger. By the time the day ended, she would be pronounced the new queen of the human worlds. And somewhere in the royal records of the Dominion, a note would be made about a single mechanic who had greeted her not with a bow, but with a high five heard across the hangar. Ethan woke early the next morning, not because he wanted to, but because the noise outside his small room never stopped. The trade station was always awake. Cargo doors opened and closed, workers shouted orders, drones hummed past his door, sat up, rubbed his eyes and thought about the job yesterday. The royal ship had been one of the strangest things he had worked on. Everything about it was controlled, polished, and secretive. But what stood out most of all was that mysterious girl. He smiled a little when he remembered her laugh. He had met plenty of officers, commanders, and rich travelers, and none of them ever laughed like that. Most looked down on mechanics, as if grease could climb into their shoes. But she was different. She had helped without a word of complaint, standing right next to him, even when sparks jumped from the coil. He poured himself a cup of instant coffee that tasted like rust, and stared at the cup as if it could explain things. Who was she, really? A technician on the royal ship? Maybe an assistant or a trainee pilot? He had not asked her full name. All she had said was Liana. Just Liana, like a simple traveler. He shook his head. "Stop thinking about royalty, Cole," he muttered to himself. "You fixed a ship. Now it's time to move on." He cleaned his tools, checked the new job list, and whistled as he made his way through the corridors. But everywhere he went that day, people were whispering. Even the dockhands were talking softly between themselves. Caught bits of the talk. "The princess, they say. She came back." No one even saw her arrive. She was walking among the crew. "The coronation starts soon, after the council vote." The word queen floated several times through the air, followed by sighs and excitement. Ethan pretended not to care, but something in his chest tightened. Princess, queen, council. He kept walking faster, hoping the noise would stop following him. By midday, the station loudspeakers crackled to life. A ceremonial voice announced, "By decision of the High Council, Her Majesty Liana of the Dominion has been crowned as rightful queen of the United Human Worlds." Ethan froze mid-step. For a moment, he could only hear the humming of lights above his head, then the words caught up with him, crashing down like falling steel. Liana, the queen. The same name, the same face, in his mind. The girl in the hangar, grinning with grease on her sleeve, hitting his palm in celebration. He nearly dropped his wrench. "No," he whispered. "No, that's ridiculous." There are lots of Lianas in the world, but the voice from the speakers repeated the name again, clear and bright. There was no mistake. He covered his eyes with one hand and groaned. "I fifth the queen," he said under his breath. The workers nearby looked at him strangely, but he was too embarrassed to notice. He imagined the formal guards still standing there, shocked and silent. He wanted to crawl into a vent and never come out. That evening, he sat in the cafeteria with his friend Nora. She worked as a pilot, bold and sharp. She noticed his strange mood right away. "You look like you just found out you broke a law," she teased. "Something like that," Ethan said. "Come on, tell me," she pressed. He leaned closer and whispered, "Remember the job I did yesterday? The royal ship?" Nora nodded. "The one surrounded by more guards than a war cruiser." "Yeah, I met this girl there. Helped me fix a coil. I thought she was a crew member. He stopped before finishing. "You even what?" he sighed. "We did a high five when we finished the repair." Nora blinked, then burst out laughing so loudly that a few people turned to stare. "You high-fived a royal officer?" "That's brave, even for you." Ethan's expression didn't change. Nora's laughter slowed. "Wait," she said slowly. "You don't mean—" He nodded miserably. "Yes, that Liana, the new queen." Nora stared for a second, and then covered her mouth. Ethan Cole, the man who high-fived the Queen. You're finished. We'll be reading about your trial tomorrow. Thanks for the comfort, he said dryly. By the next day, the rumor had already spread beyond the cafeteria. People grinned when he passed. One mechanic even saluted him jokingly and said, "So, Your Majesty's favorite engineer?" Ethan rolled his eyes and muttered something about quitting and moving to a mining colony where no one cared about royal customs. But deep inside, there was a small spark of curiosity. Why had the Queen not said who she was? Why had she been working beside him like an ordinary crew member? Later that night, as the trade station lights dimmed to imitate sunset, he looked out from his small window. The royal fleet shone in the distance, thousands of silver lights drifting through the black sky. Somewhere in that shining cluster was her ship. He thought of her again, the way she had looked at him with calm eyes, the way she had said thank you. Maybe she had wanted for a small moment to just be a person, not a symbol on a throne. He smiled faintly at the thought. Still, he could imagine the headlines back on Earth. Mechanic greets Queen with a high five. He sighed and rubbed his forehead. Next time, Ethan, he muttered. Maybe just nod. But he knew deep down, if he met her again, he'd probably forget himself the same way. He was that kind of man. Ethan tried to forget everything about that high five, but the universe did not make it easy. Everywhere he turned, someone was whispering about the new Queen. Every news feed showed her picture, her calm face, her steady eyes, her quiet smile, the same smile he had seen in that hangar. Each time he saw her image appear on a screen, his stomach twisted like a broken wire. For 2 days, he stayed away from Dock 12. He told his manager that he had engine recalibrations to finish on the lower decks. He thought maybe if he kept his head down, the story would fade away. Surely the Queen had more important things to think about than one mechanic with bad manners. But gossip traveled faster than any starship. By the third morning, everyone working in his section knew that Ethan Cole had been the mechanic who touched the Queen's hand in a friendly slap. He did not know how that truth escaped. Maybe one of the guards told someone, or maybe the story just had a life of its own. People loved stories about accidentally brave men. He kept hearing his name in passing sentences that him, the one from the hangar. Imagine high-fiving a queen. He did not look up, just fixed wires, changed filters, and pretended not to hear. That afternoon, while checking an air filter near the outer hull, a soft chime rang in his pocket communicator. It was a message from the royal office. There were only a few words. Mechanic Ethan Cole. Her Majesty wishes to meet you. Report to Dock 12 at 1500 hours. He groaned so loudly that the nearby technician asked if he heard himself. Only my future, he muttered. 3 hours later, he stood outside Dock 12 again with clean clothes and hands scrubbed almost raw. He had even combed his hair, which was rare. 2 guards waited for him, their faces unreadable. They led him through long corridors that gleamed like mirrors. He tried not to trip over his own nerves. When they entered the royal hall, Ethan blinked at the sight. He had never seen anything so grand. The wide chamber glowed with pale blue light. Columns stretched so tall he could not see where they ended. At the far end was a raised platform, and on it sat Queen Liana. She wore a white gown that seemed to shine faintly, as if stitched from starlight itself. But her eyes were the same warm, clear, and quietly curious. Ethan froze halfway down the carpet. He had no idea how to act. Bow. Salute. Hide. He chose honesty. Your Majesty, he said in a rush, I swear I didn't know. It was just a regular high five. I meant no disrespect. If I'd known who you were, I wouldn't have done that. The guards shifted, waiting for her reaction. Instead of anger, she smiled. You would have bowed, I suppose, she said. Yes, or maybe even knelt, he said quickly. Well, then I would have missed that high five, she said calmly. Ethan blinked. You aren't upset? She shook her head slightly. Why should I be? You helped me when no one else could. You were honest and treated me like an equal. That is a rare gift, Ethan Cole. He rubbed the back of his neck, unsure what to say. Most people would call it bad manners. I call it refreshing, she said. You reminded me what this kingdom needs to remember, that titles mean nothing if the people behind them forget how to be human. The hall was silent. The guards looked at each other, surprised. Ethan could barely breathe. "Your Majesty, I still think maybe I broke about 12 royal rules," he said softly. She smiled again. "Then I will simply change the rules." That reply nearly made him laugh, but he caught himself just in time. "I'll be careful next time," he said, half serious, half amused. "I hope not," she said. "Careful people rarely build anything worth remembering." She stood up and stepped closer. The guards moved aside. When she stopped in front of him, he could smell the faint scent of metal and roses, like the hangar air mixed with gentleness. She said quietly, "I meant to thank you properly. You fixed more than an engine, reminded me what kind of leader I must be." Ethan nodded slowly, his nervousness fading. "Glad I could help. Though I really didn't plan to teach any royal lessons. Just wanted that ship to fly again." "That is exactly why it mattered," she answered. Honest work done for its own sake is the strongest thing in the universe. He did not know how to reply, so he just stood there, feeling very small and oddly proud at the same time. Finally, she looked over her shoulder at one of her advisors. "Assign Mr. Cole as the chief mechanic for my fleet transport. If we are to travel across the stars, I want someone nearby who is not afraid to tell me the truth." Ethan almost dropped his communicator. "Wait, chief mechanic?" She turned back to him. "Lest that is too troublesome," she said with a gentle teasing tone. He smiled helplessly. "Your Majesty, it would be an honor. But I still can't believe this is happening." "It is," she said quietly, "and you may relax. There will be no punishment for the high five." As she walked toward the exit, he found the courage to speak again. "Thank you, Your Majesty, for not being angry." She looked back over her shoulder. "Why would I be angry, Ethan Cole? Every new beginning needs a little surprise." Then she was gone, leaving him standing alone in the shining hall, mouth slightly open, wondering how a simple mechanic ended up talking to a queen who smiled at rules instead of obeying them. Ethan's life changed faster than an engine on overdrive. One morning, he had been just another man fixing cargo ships for pay, and a week later he was walking through the royal hangars of the human dominion as chief mechanic for the Queen's fleet. Every corridor looked new, every tool gleamed. The sound of his boots echoed on spotless floors where heavy workers were rare. He was used to noise and chaos, but this place was quiet, organized, and a little too clean for comfort. He tried to keep his head down and his mouth shut, but people never stopped whispering about him. Some called him lucky. Others said that the Queen had chosen him only for amusement, not skill. Ethan did not care. Engines did not care either, and he preferred the company of things that did not gossip. Each morning, he checked the Queen's transport ship, the same one they had repaired together. It became his favorite machine, not just for its beauty, but because it had brought him face to face with the person who had changed his life. Queen Liana visited often, but she never made a grand entrance. She would walk into the hangar quietly, her gown covered by a long coat, blending almost like an ordinary traveler. One morning, she came while Ethan was fixing a thruster lining. He looked up and saw her watching him again, that same soft expression on her face. "Your Majesty," he said, standing quickly. She smiled. "If you keep calling me that here, everyone will stop working. You can call me Liana when it's just us." Ethan hesitated. "That feels wrong," maybe she said, "but it also feels honest." "Go on, say it once." He cleared his throat awkwardly. "All right, Liana." The name felt strange on his tongue, but it made her smile grow warmer. As they walked around the hangar, she asked questions about the ship, about the work, about how he had learned so much. He told her the simple truth: he had started as a boy, repairing old mining machines, learned by watching, and never stopped learning since. She listened carefully, not like a ruler, but like someone who truly wanted to understand. They stopped near the observation window, where the stars stretched like endless rivers of light. She said, "Do you ever wonder what it would be like to travel beyond what we know? Past the Dominion borders, into those empty reaches no one has ever mapped?" Ethan nodded slowly. "All the time. It's what every mechanic dreams of. New engines, new skies. But it's also what scares most of us. Out there, if something breaks, there's no one coming to help." She looked at him seriously. "That's what leadership feels like, too." The words sank deep. He saw in that moment that under the crown and calm grace, she was someone who felt the same kind of loneliness he did. Only hers was larger, spread over nations and stars. That day marked the start of something different between them. She kept coming back to the hangar, asking about small things at first: fuel mix, engine noise, maintenance schedules, and then about bigger things like trade routes, defense plans, even what common workers thought of royal rule. Ethan answered honestly, even when his answers were not kind. Each time, she smiled, as if truth pleased her more than flattery ever could. One evening, when most of the crew had gone, she and Ethan stood by the main engine core, bathed in its soft glow. She said quietly, "I think people follow power when they should follow purpose. You see the difference?" He nodded slowly. "Power makes people obey. Purpose makes them believe." She looked thoughtful. "Exactly. You think more like a leader than most of the council." Ethan laughed softly. "I'm just a man who knows when things stop working." "Then maybe it's good you're here," she said. "Our world needs people who can fix what's broken, even if those things aren't made of metal." Before he could reply, a messenger hurried into the room. He bowed to the Queen and handed her a tablet. She scanned the message quickly, her face turning serious. "A border station lost contact," she said. "It might be a simple signal error, or it could be something larger." Ethan watched her study the data with steady hands. She looked calm, but he sensed the weight behind her eyes. "Can I help?" he asked. She thought for a second, then said, "Yes. Prepare a smaller ship. We'll go ourselves." "I need to see what's happening." Ethan blinked. "You mean you're going to?" "Of course," she said calmly. "I will not rule from far away. I must see my people." And just like that, she turned and walked out, calling orders to her officers. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, then hurried after her. He was her mechanic, and if she was heading into danger, then so was he. The next morning, the royal escort launched from the dock. The engines glowed under his steady hands, smooth and firm, ready for anything. As Liana's ship left the safety of the station and headed into the unknown, Ethan looked out at the stars again. He realized something then. The Queen was not just his ruler. She was a friend, a partner, in courage and curiosity. And somehow, against all logic, a simple mechanic from Earth had become part of a story that stretched far beyond wrenches and fuel lines, a story of trust between two people who never should have met but somehow changed each other anyway. The small royal ship sailed through deep space like a shining arrow. Its silver wings cut across the quiet darkness, as if drawing a path between stars. Inside the engine bay, Ethan worked carefully, checking every gauge and wire. He felt the soft vibration under his boots and smiled. Everything ran smooth. It always gave him peace to hear a healthy engine. But this time, he was not repairing a trade ship or a cargo boat. He was flying beside the Queen herself, heading into uncertain space on a mission without a map. Queen Liana was calm as always. She spent hours in the control room speaking with her officers, then joined Ethan in the lower deck to see how the engines were doing. She still wore the same long coat over her gown, moving easily as if she had done this 100 times. When she appeared in the work bay, Ethan looked up and said, "Engine steady, Your Majesty." "She's flying like a starbird." "Good," she said with a little smile. "We'll be at the border zone soon." The last signal from the station came from that region. Ethan nodded. "If it's just a damaged relay, it'll be an easy fix. If it's not," he stopped, studying her calm face. "Then I suppose you already know what to do." "I always know what I should do," she said softly. "I just never know how many will follow." Her answer made him thoughtful. He had seen many leaders shout orders in loud voices, but Liana did not shout. She listened. She looked people in the eye. That was why he trusted her, even when danger waited ahead. Hours later, their ship entered the range of the silent station. The place floated like a dark shadow over a gray world. No lights, no movement, no signal. The crew exchanged uneasy looks. Ethan moved closer to the viewing screen. "Like a full power failure," he said. "Bring us closer," Liana ordered. "I want a clear scan." They docked carefully and entered the station through the emergency gate. Inside, the air was still and cold. Dust floated where lights once burned. The crew spoke in whispers as if afraid to wake ghosts. Ethan walked beside the Queen, shining his lamp along the walls. Worn-out cables hung loose, and the smell of burnt plastic filled the hall. At the control hub, he started checking panels. "Main generator's out," he said. We can restart it if the coils aren't cracked. Do it, Liana said. Worked in silence for several minutes. His hands moved quickly, confident. The others watched as he reconnected the cables and reset the old circuits. At first, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the lights flickered back to life. The entire room brightened. "There we go," he said with relief. "The station breathes again." Cheers broke through the crew. For a moment, even Liana looked pleased. But then, from the communicator, a weak signal began to hum, an old distress message looping again and again. Ethan turned it up. The words came broken but clear enough to hear one line: "System attack, power drain, evacuate." Everyone went silent. Liana looked around the room. Who sent this? "Possibly one of the engineers before they escaped," Ethan said. "We can pull the last record." He unlocked the terminal and found the logs full of scrambled data. Still, one note stood out at the bottom. It said that the power drain came from inside the cord. Too much energy pulled from pilots' control seats, as if someone had turned the station's power grid into a trap. Liana frowned. So this was no accident. Ethan nodded slowly. Someone wanted this station empty. She looked toward the planet outside the window. "Then we fix it, and we find out who." He watched her for a moment, standing tall beneath the burning lights, her face calm even in danger. He thought she looked less like a queen, and more like a captain ready to fight for her people. Working side by side, they rerouted the power flow and erased the harmful code that had shut the system down. When the last command was set, the hum of proper energy filled the air again. The station came fully alive, systems restored. Ethan smiled tiredly and wiped his forehead. "All done, Your Majesty." Another engine back from the grave. Liana returned his smile with quiet pride. "And once again, it was your hands that made it happen." He laughed softly. "Guess I just keep finding trouble near your ships." "Good," she said. "I like people who find trouble and fix it." As they returned to their ship, the dawn of a distant sun spilled across their viewing glass. The border station now glowed behind them, alive and secure. The crew celebrated quietly, but Ethan remained thoughtful. He turned to her and said, "You could have sent anyone for this, but you came yourself." She looked out at the stars. "I wanted to know, with my own eyes, how far the Dominion still needs to grow. No report could tell me that. Seeing what is broken helps me to understand who we are." Ethan nodded. "And fixing what's broken helps us remember we can always start again." When they landed back at the central station, days later, news spread fast. The Queen herself had led the rescue. People cheered, telling stories about her courage, about the mechanic who never bowed before fixing what mattered. Liana spoke to the council, saying leadership is not built from distance. It is built from shared hands, from the courage to touch the world we hope to save. Ethan listened from the side, still wearing his old work jacket. When she finished, she turned to him with that familiar spark in her eyes. Then, smiling, she raised her hand. Ethan groaned quietly, but he could not help smiling back. He met her palm with his own, the sound echoing across the hall, just like that first day in the hangar. The people laughed and clapped, and the moment became a sign of unity across the Dominion. Years later, historians would say that the new age of peace had begun with a greeting between a queen and a mechanic. But for Ethan, it would always just be what it truly was: a simple high five between two people who saw each other not as ruler and worker, but as friends, bound by trust, courage, and a shared light among the stars.